This video is on how to use your graphing calculator to graph a function. So let's say, for example, we're asked to graph y equals the absolute value of x plus 1 minus 5. What we're going to do is you'll turn your calculator on, and to graph things we're going to press the y equals button because we need to type in an equation in two variables. When I say two variables, I mean an x variable and a y variable. So when I press this, you'll notice at the top here we have plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. On my calculator, none of these are highlighted. Yours should also not be highlighted. So for example, if plot 1 is highlighted, it would look like this. You can turn that off by simply moving your up and down arrows and pressing enter. So let's type in now y equals the absolute value of x plus 1 minus 5. So I can locate the absolute value command in my calculator by pressing the math button, moving over from the math tab to the number tab, and then ABS is the calculator's abbreviation for absolute value. And depending on the recency of your calculator purchase, yours may say ABS with the parenthesis, or it may have put the absolute value bars in there for you. It just depends on kind of how old your operating system is. And I'm just going to fill in and type in, so my equation looks like y equals absolute value x plus 1 minus 5. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit graph. And I can see my graph. If you could not see your graph, the issue is that you don't have an appropriate sized window. So you have two options. You can press the window button and pick your window yourself. We should know that for this absolute value function, the vertex would be at h comma k. So I can reasonably surmise that the window that I've selected from negative 10 to positive 10 on the x's and from negative 10 to positive 10 on the y's would be an appropriate viewing window. If you're graphing something or a kind of function you don't really know anything about, there's a couple of options under the zoom menu. So if you're just not sure, zoom standard is a good place to start. So if you press zoom standard, it'll jigger your window so that you have just the standard window, which is from negative 10 to positive 10. If you are doing graphing a scatter plot like we did in a previous lesson, you can do zoom stat, and that'll fit your scatter plot on the screen. I don't have one of those, so I'm not going to bother pressing it because it's not really going to do anything. And that's about it. So the rest of these zoom commands aren't necessarily things that are going to be super important for us. And that's kind of how to use your graphing calculator to graph an absolute value function. Had you wanted to solve, say, this, we talked about in class that we can think of this as two functions and look for the intersection. So your calculator can do that as well. So I've already typed in that first line because it's what I started with. I'm just going to type in y equals 3. And I'm going to go ahead and hit graph. And this red line that's come in, that's the graph for y equals 3. Critical for about what we're about to do is that you can see the intersections of both functions. So notice that I indeed see both places where the graphs meet. Had you not been able to see both places, you'd want to change your window so that you could see both places. What I'm going to do now is I want to find these values for x where the graph intersects. To do that, I'm going to press second and the trace button. This opens the calculate menu, and the command that I'm going to look for here is the intersect command. I'm sure that's shocking that if we're looking for where two graphs intersect, we would use the intersect command. You'll see at the bottom of the screen now, the calculator is going to ask me a couple of questions. So it asks me first curve, so it's going to need me to tell it which two graphs it wants me to find the intersection of. So first curve, well, the absolute value is one of them. You can see my cursor right here on the absolute value graph. So I'm just going to press enter, saying, yep, that graph. The straight line, that's the second graph I want to find. I want it to use to find the intersections. So I'll press enter there. And then I guess. So it just says you move your cursor so that it's close to where I think the intersection is, and I can press enter. So there it says x equals, it says that is the 0.73, so one of my solutions is x equals 3. I can repeat that process then. So first curve, second curve, and then guess. So just press enter twice there for the first curve and second curve. And then I'm going to be scrolling over here to the other intersection for my guess for quite some time. Anytime now, calculator. Anytime. And the other point of intersection is -9, 3. So my other solution is -9. Now, for solving an absolute value function, this isn't tremendously useful. But if you had been asked to solve, like, something like this, where maybe we don't know how to solve this immediately, this is a nice technique you can use. So I'm going to go back to the y equals menu. I'm just going to clear out these old things and do this new one. So you notice above the x squared in blue is the square root symbol, so I can do square root x plus 2, and then 7, and then hit graph again. The blue graph is my square root graph, and there is my y equals 7. Notice that I can't see their intersection on this screen. Oh no, what do I do? Well, I'm going to press the window button, and I know that I'm going to have to see farther to the right to see that intersection. So I'm going to change my x max to a bigger value. Now I don't know when that's going to happen, so I'm just going to take a guess and maybe pick 50 and put that there. It looks like they're still pretty far apart. So I'm going to try just pressing 50, picking 50, and seeing if I can see their intersection there. And yep, just barely got it, but barely is good enough. So you can see now their intersection right there. So now I do second to trace, pick the intersect command. First curve, well, that's the square root curve. I want to use that. Second curve, that's the straight line. I want to use that. Guess, and now I'm just going to be pressing the over arrow for a half an hour while I get close to that. Now, does it have to be like how close is close enough? Like this is plenty close. I'm just going to press enter. So there's my answer, x equals 47. So on an ACT or a similar standardized test where you don't need to show any work, this method of graphing and finding the intersection is certainly a good one that you could use. This concludes using our graphing calculator to graph function and using our graphing calculator to solve an equation by graphing. Thanks. Have a nice day.